Hello, it's Karen Burniston, and today's technique video is going to combine a couple different pop-up dies from my collection. You can see them all at karenburniston.com. In this card, you're able to see that stacked snowman through the window, and then as the card opens, he expands. With my dies, you choose your card size. So for today's card, I decided on a 5-inch square card. That's a 5 by 10-inch piece of cardstock, and then I've added 2 paper panels to the interior of the card, and those are 4 3/4-inch squares. I've grabbed the 4 dies I'm going to use and put them on some magnet sheets here. And I'm going to start by using the Nature Edges die to get some snowbanks for my card. So I've taken 3 pieces of a very lightweight white cardstock. I mean, it's really light, like 60-pound cardstock. And the reason I chose such a light weight is because I'm going to need to die cut through it later to make the windows, and also because I can stack up all 3 pieces at one time and get through it in one pass with that edge die. And those pieces of cardstock are 4 inches wide by 3 inches tall. I'm going to flip the die around and choose a new location about halfway down, something that kind of looks a little different than the first edge, just so I get some variation. And I like that die because it does do the stitch lines on both sides of the cut, so it's a time saver. Not only did I go through 3 layers at one time, but that I got that decorative stitch line on both sides of the edge, so that with that single pass, I'm able to then just overlap those 2 pieces and create that layered stitched snowbank look. And then for putting those in the card, I'm lining them up along the inside edge of the pattern paper, that inside corner. And I used just 1 line of adhesive along the bottom of those first pieces and put them in, leaving the top unstuck so that I can slide in the upper part of the snowbank behind that first piece and create that layered look. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that exact same process on another 4 3/4-inch square of pattern paper for the front of the card, but I'm not going to attach it to the front of the card yet, so I'm just making this piece separately. Now the reason I didn't have the snowbanks go end to end on the inside or the front of the card is because I decided I wanted to add a vertical decoration out on the outside edges. That's just basically an optical thing. I know that the Katherine label pop-up is going to dictate that my window in this card is not going to be centered in a 5-inch card. It's going to be a little bit more towards the inside. So by purposely putting a different decoration out on the outside edge, it actually moves the focus of the card in so that it doesn't look so much like the snowman is just off center. Okay, time to build a pop-up. I'm going to switch to a heavier white cardstock. This happens to be a 100-pound cardstock, and that worked great, but I'm sure you could probably get away with 80-pound. Just don't use the really, really thin stuff. Now the mechanism I need from the Katherine label is that L piece. From the Snowman twist circle, I'm going to use the large stitched circle. I'm going to use the solid one, that's the middle part of the snowman, and then I want to do his face. Now with the face, you use the small solid circle, and then you also nest in the little face die at the same time, and then just roll that through my machine. There are score lines in this mechanism piece, and it's always easier, I think, to fold it first towards the score line. So in other words, you look on the side where you can see it, you put your thumbnail into that fold and fold towards your thumb first, and then immediately reverse it, because every one of the fold lines on this Katherine label mechanism will end up being a mountain fold. So that means away from you. So see, I'm starting as a valley, reversing to a mountain. So basically the way this mechanism works is out there on the long side, it's going to come around and make a little box, and it has a tab that will connect it on the other side. So that would be the typical assembly for the Katherine label. If you purchase that die, you can watch the video for that die set and see how to do that. But for my snowman card today, I need to make a little modification. I want to suspend the middle circle sitting on that ledge right there. So I'm going to put a slot in it to where I can slide it down. But although I have a ledge on the left-hand side, right now I don't have a ledge on the right-hand side. So that circle would end up being tilted if I don't create a little ledge for it on the right-hand side. So just taking my scissors, not doing any measuring, I'm just going to put a little notch into that side where basically it's at the same height as the other side. Okay, now comes the figuring of where to put the slot in the circle. And one thing I first need to do is figure out how far down from the top of the circle I should put my slot. And I will use the box as a guide for that. As you can see, I can just put my middle circle there over that top little panel of the box and figure out that about half of the width of the box is good for the circle. So I'm going to make my pencil line about that far down from the top of the circle. Next, I need to figure out how wide my slot should be, and I'll use the width of my new ledge, okay? So that means on the left-hand side, it's just on the side of the tall column, but on the right-hand side, it should be into that notch. So that's how wide my slot needs to be to sit in that little spot that I've given it. Now I've got 3 little pencil lines at the top of my circle. That's all I need now to be able to cut the slot. Now I'm a fan of using my craft knife and a ruler for making the slot. I'm just putting my ruler on those 2 outer pencil lines as far down as the middle one, right? Because that tells me how low my slot needs to be. Move the ruler up just a smidge, cut 2 parallel lines, and then connect the outside parts to create a slot. But you could use a paper piercer to get a hole started, then maybe use your detail scissors. So I leave it to you as to how you want to get that slot into the top of that circle. Now recall that the width of that slot is meant to fit down where that notch is. So see, it's going to be just a little bit too narrow to go down easily onto the rest of the column. So what I want to do is just with my scissors, just take a smidge off the side. I don't want to take off as wide as the notch because that would actually allow my circle to slide up the column. And what I really want it to do is once it's down seated into my location, I want it to stay there. So see, I just took a smidge off. I'm just looking to have that slot be barely wide enough to fit down on that column and then sit down in that notch. And I can see, ooh, I need just a smidge more. So again, I'm going to come back to my scissors. I definitely don't want to go as wide as the notch itself. You can see how narrow I'm making that little sliver of cut. I'm just taking a smidge off. Perfect. I bet you it's going to fit now. So I'm going to put that slot down over that column and then slide it down. It's going to be real tight, but that's okay because once it gets into the notch, it's going to loosen up. I'm going to get down into that notch and it'll basically just click in there, and now it'll be seated. Now from here, I'm just going to continue on with the regular assembly for the Katherine label mechanism, which means a strong adhesive out there in that little small tab, and it comes around and connects on the bottom of the other side to create that little box. So that would just be the normal assembly. So all I needed to do for this card is get that center circle kind of attached to the mechanism, and from there it just becomes regular assembly. Let's get my big circle out and take a look at this mechanism in both its open and closed position. Open is up, closed is pushing it forward. Okay, in that closed position, remember we're going to see this snowman through the window. So I'm actually going to want to arrange my closed position. So I've collapsed that box down and my circle has come forward, and then it'll lift up like that. So the closed position is flat. And when I do that and arrange those circles over the center of each other, most likely you're going to end up with that little box panel just above your large circle. That's probably the location that it's going to work the best. So for that, I would actually like to connect my large circle now to my little box, and I'll do that by just putting a piece of strong tape in the middle where the two connect. Okay, so this is just basically a placeholder. I want to get those two connected to each other using that tape so that I've guaranteed my closed position where it's going to collapse down and look great as a stacked snowman. Now it's time to figure out where to cut the window into the card. So first things first, I'm going to figure out where the mechanism will eventually be attached to the card, and I'll use a temporary tape to hold that outer triangle. That will end up being the panel that gets connected to the card, just like usual for the Katherine label, just to the left of the fold line, and only that little triangle. So that's the one that I will temporarily tape down. Now to determine the closed position, I need to find that diagonal score line and bring this whole side of the mechanism over here to the left. And you'll see that the tape is going to be visible when I get it into that position. Tape there's right underneath my thumb. And I'm just going to hold it now into that closed position, and that will allow me to determine where my window needs to be. And I'll just use a pencil there on the snow to go around the bottom half of that circle and mark right on the snow where that circle needs to be. Then I can remove my mechanism. I want that stitched circle, so the same one that's the size of the big circle on the snowman. I can just line that up right there on that pencil line and tape it into place. And do use that temporary tape to hold that in place while you die cut this step, because you're trying to go through 2 layers of snow, pattern paper, and cardstock. Most likely it's going to take a few passes through the machine, and you may want to flip the whole card over and roll it to get that different pressure. And in that case, you would definitely want that die taped down. And if there's any remaining pencil lines, you can erase those. Okay, now we've got the inside window done, but we also want to put that decoration on the front of the card and have the window be in the same location. So for that, I'm just going to line up my front panel decoration and use a temporary tape to just hold it onto the card. And then I'm going to go inside the card and stick that die down into that opening. It'll be real easy to seat it in there. The die will just want to go back into the same location, tape it in place, and then roll it through a few more times. And then I can remove that paper panel because I'd first like to add a square of transparency over the opening. So I'm just using my tape runner there, just adding that square of a transparency, some kind of clear material, add a little bit more tape runner, and then just line up and put my paper panel right onto the front of the card. And then I'll just finish out the decoration with that same side embellishment, which is just a thin strip of the same color cardstock. And then I found that lacy washi tape in my stash. It's from Stampin' Up! Now I can add my mechanism into the card. So I want to sit my snowman face down into that opening again. Remember, I should be able to see the red liner tape there. Then I want to make sure that my little triangle is right there along the fold of the card. That's very important. So I'm just folding that back so that I can add my glue onto just that triangle. So that triangle is the only thing that attaches to the left side of the card, and it should line up right there along the fold. It can go anywhere along the fold, but of course we've dictated its location by the location of our window. So I'm going to leave this snowman in its closed position, and now I'm going to add glue all over the back of that circle and next to the tape on the little panel up above. Then I can remove that liner from that tape so I've got a nice big huge sticky surface, making sure that's seated right down into that window. I'm going to close the card against the exposed adhesive. Okay, giving everything a good press and giving it a second for the glue to set up. And now let's take a look at it. It looks great in the closed position, and then when you open it, the mechanism pops up and draws up that center circle. So that's working great. He just needs a head and some decorations now. Oh, and I just happened to notice that the base of the circle is close to that edge to where I think I can actually tuck it underneath. So that was just a fun bonus. Now right now the center circle is kind of flopping down onto the big one. It's not staying up, and it looks good that way, so it could just remain that way. You could just decorate it, continue on decorating, and let it be that sort of diagonal look. That is kind of a cool look. But I'll also show you how you can get it to suspend up in the air. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a scarf. So what I want to do is add a strong tape onto the front of the box. So this would just be the front of that box right above the circle. And what that strong tape is going to do is it's going to hold on my little pieces of ribbon that are going to be the scarf for my snowman. And then to make that look a little cleaner across his neck, I'll actually add a small piece of ribbon over the top of the end. So just right across the front of that box. And then just a quick check that I like that in the closed position as well. Now here's that optional technique if you'd like to trap that center circle more up in the air as the card is opened. And you do that by adding a little glue dot or a piece of adhesive under the scarf end and then bringing that circle up before you press that ribbon into place. So basically you're letting the ribbon pull that circle up as the card is opened. The Snowman Twist Circle die set does come with all of the accessories you need for the snowman, like the hat and the hat band. I cut a black small solid circle to back the face piece and added black Nuvo crystal drops in the center and then just glue around the perimeter. And that way when I press those two pieces together, when those black crystal drops dry, it'll actually give me a shiny little face to the snowman. And then I can just finish out my snowman's face by adding the carrot nose, and then I'll glue his little hat to the top of his head. And then that gets attached to the top of the pop-up box. So this is a fun idea. You take two arms and you glue one to one side of the mechanism and one to the other side so that in the closed position the arm is down, and then as it opens he looks like he's waving. And then I just added his other arm attached to the circle, kind of underneath the scarf, and then 3 rhinestones to be the buttons. For a greeting, I used word set 3, and I used winter greetings cut out of red cardstock where I had double-sided adhesive tape on the back of the cardstock before die cutting. That way those are just stickers and I can stack them and shape them. So I decided to do 2 layers to give it more dimension. An optional little finishing touch for the window openings would be to create the little thin rings that will perfectly encircle them. And you do that by nesting the 2 largest circles together from the twist circle set, and that creates that thin ring. And then the final little bit of accessorizing for me was to add those snowflakes. So that snowflake die comes in the Snowman twist circle set. I cut it several times out of a metallic silver paper. It's just a super cute, relatively simple little card. It ends up being 5 by 5, so it will mail easily in an A7 envelope for a single stamp. If you are not watching this YouTube video on my blog, just know that you can get there. There's a little information bubble in the upper right corner. You can click that and go directly to the blog post, or you'll find the direct link in the About section below this YouTube video, along with supply links. You'll find those in both locations. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com, where you can find out information about purchasing these dies, as well as links to all my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.